This video has a lot of information or discussion for paddlers on different topics. It's a follow-up trip that will be shown here to a paddling event earlier the same day, which was a lake paddling group event that I was one of the organizers for, and which was actually a follow-up event to Swedish Air Kayak Day in 2023. Swedish Air Kayak Day is something that I am one of the founders and organizers for, and I'll explain that a little bit in a moment. But basically in this video I'll talk about portage, about carrying a kayak, and I will talk about logistics, things that might happen unexpectedly, things that one as a paddler might want to consider, be prepared for, and take into consideration when planning a paddling trip. But basically here we're going to talk about carrying a kayak a little bit, because that's something that we had to do here, and something that is a natural part of kayaking if you're paddling for longer stretches. Here, for example, along this route, we're heading to the second portage point along this route, which is for those who paddle in Stockholm between Albysjön and Tyresö, in the direction of Tyresö Castle, generally speaking. And we're heading towards the lake system here and heading up to Drevviken, and we'll be paddling to Vega, which I had never paddled to. So anyway, as I show this trip,
yes,
here's Göran, who I paddled with, continuing this day's paddle. I'll kind of weave this into the discussion. So as you could see there, maybe on my kayak, I actually had a kayak trolley, and I was simply not sure whether I would have company continuing here. I was expecting to do some solo kayaking after the other trip, which wasn't that long. The group trip was about 8 kilometers. Some paddlers had slower crafts and some had faster crafts. So we had a nice lunch and went on land as well, exploring a bit. But here we're now carrying the kayaks instead. And the reason why I'm not using the kayak trolley here is simply that we decided to take a route there that isn't all that long at all. I had a quick shout out note there to the Kayak Crew, another YouTube account with some really nice inflatable kayaking, among other things, paddling experiences in the UK. And we actually had a chat about portage and carrying a kayak, and how that can be fairly heavy if you're a solo paddler, especially on a trip. Even with a lightweight kayak, it can get quite heavy because you have all of the equipment, all of the gear with you. In this case, as noted, I had my trolley there, my kayak trolley, along, and I would have used it if I was here on my own. But since there are two of us, we decided to try this new launch spot potential here. You would normally go to the right there. We went to the left, which was a bit trickier, but well, it ended up working. These guys definitely felt the carrying of paddlecraft a bit more, because they had done this stretch with at least 2 carry points, back and forth with a rental canoe or several rental canoes, and they have been carrying a lot on that day. Our crafts here are lighter, but even so, we decided to try this route. The location we just passed there turned out not to be very advantageous to actually put the kayaks in the water, because it was deeper than expected and a little bit higher than expected, so getting down wouldn't be all that practical. So that's why we're just going a little bit through the forest
Ja,
here
lite utmaningar.
to get to the water, and that works just fine. But when you're doing that, one thing to be aware of is, of course, the risk of tripping, of twisting an ankle or getting stuck somewhere. And the tricky part when you're carrying with 2 people at the same time is actually that the paddler at the back there will not really see what's in front of him or her in the same way, because they'll have the kayak in front of them. So it can be a bit trickier actually to be the second paddler carrying. Your visibility will be impaired. So something to take into account if you're the first one. Don't move too fast, take breaks and check in and such and such.
Så du inte tappar fotfäste helt där.
Especially when you have rocks like this, and if the water were colder than now, this is actually a real risk factor.
Ja, vi tar inte den lätta vägen.
Most paddlers that get injured, or many paddlers that get injured during paddling or end up in the water with an unexpected, unwanted capsize, that often happens when you're getting into your kayak or putting your kayak in the water or getting out of your kayak. So if you have sharp rocks and the like, that can be a bit tricky. Things can be slippery, you can trip and fall, you can lose your balance, you might not use the right technique to get into your kayak, etc. So something to practice and be aware of, and of course if you can help each other, that's a good thing. In this case we don't have heavily loaded kayaks, meaning for kayak camping, but if you do, then you would probably want to be 4 people carrying, if you can, one single kayak, because they'll be quite heavy, so you don't want any back injury and the like. Anyway, before continuing, here is Göran, one of the paddlers who was part of the lake paddle that we had earlier on the same day. We had a paddler joining us even from Australia, and otherwise paddlers who had, most of them, been part of Swedish Air Kayak Day, which is a really nice event, gathering inflatable kayaks, folding kayaks, and packrafts are also welcome. And this takes place every year.
Här har vi en liten anke. Du ser, nu har de hittat oss. Tror att de ska få mat.
These guys are always curious because they know there might be food. Anyway, we're using inflatable kayaks in this case. I'm using an Itiwit X500 Strenfit, and Göran is using an AdvancedFrame from Advanced Elements. Another note there is, unfortunately, people leave stuff that ends up in the water, in this case plastic. You might want to have gloves or something to pick that up, but it's always a nice thing to get that out of the water, because birds, fish or animals could get trapped, and it's really a bad thing for the environment. So let's keep our waterways clean. But anyway, we are paddling now on a fairly famous stretch here in Stockholm. The lake systems we just passed, and then we're arriving now at Gammelströmmen, which is a location which, depending on the water levels, can have quite a bit of current, and the water level also varies. Sometimes it's really shallow here and you might not be able to get by at all because it's too shallow. Other times it can be a lot easier. So in this case it's somewhere in between, and I'm kind of being careful here to move along without doing too much damage to my paddle, or breaking my paddle even. This is a real risk here. Let's see how it goes for Göran. And this, by the way, is one of those things to expect as a paddler, that if you're in a place like this, you might well end up in a space where you'd have to get out into the water and wade for a bit. I've done that here a number of times, and the thing is that, again, depending on the water levels, it might be shallow here and there, but all of a sudden you hit a hole and it's really deep, which means you could trip and you fall into the water and risk twisting an ankle or getting stuck or whatnot. So again, something to be aware of and be careful with, and definitely to have good footwear. In this case, because we're going against the current, it seems to be working quite nicely for me, actually. This might be one of the times where I actually manage to get upstream here without having to step out. Usually it is trickier, and many times I actually decide to get out of the kayak and wade for a bit. It's not a long stretch, but still. And actually, once I was here with a foreign visitor who was in a tandem kayak with me, who didn't speak English, or neither of us spoke the language that the other could speak. And he was very confident in his abilities and stepped out of the kayak before I could stop him, or I couldn't make myself understood anyway. So he stepped out of that tandem kayak to get down into the stream here, thinking that it would be shallow, but of course he actually ended up stepping into one of these deep holes that I talk about. So he stepped down, lost his footing immediately and fell into the water, and with his other leg, his other foot, pressed down on the side of the kayak. So that tipped the kayak over 90 degrees basically, so I also fell into the water. So that was a bit of a capsize, if you will. It was summer, it was warm, no issues. But things like that definitely can happen, so be a little bit careful when you're moving around in water like that and having to get out of the kayak. Anyway, this stretch, as I said, is quite famous in the sense that, well, not all paddlers know it, but those who do appreciate it, because you have Gammelströmmen, the small creek there that we just passed, with a little bit of moving water, so you can obviously, with the best circumstances, get both up and down it without portage, without carrying anything, or without having to wade with your kayak. Sometimes you have to wade, and that's fine. But then here comes Gudöån. So that's another creek, and it's actually quite nice. On this day the light isn't that great, it's gloomy and grey, and my old GoPro 9 is kind of not getting the best picture here, but it's a really nice place. So if you are actually in Stockholm, I would say this is one of the better places, especially for newer paddlers, that is reasonably close to Stockholm City. It's not that far away by public transport or by car. And here on this creek, Gudöån, you can also rent a kayak or a canoe, like those chaps did that I helped out carrying their canoe, as you saw earlier in the video. So that allows you to explore all of the lakes that are connected here and these two creeks. And then if you were to paddle further with another carry, more portage, which is a longer carry actually, then you would be able to go to Tyresö Castle, or you would be able to connect to the open sea after a while, because this is lake water, fresh water, or this creek here, it's fresh water, whereas on the other side of the lake where we started, Albysjön, it's actually seawater, salt water. So that stretch over there is actually quite long, and you would be well advised to bring a kayak trolley if you were to go there, or in other locations where you expect carries to be more than, say, 50-100 meters. A kayak trolley will do you a lot of good, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Having a good kayak trolley is key, and then again, you should probably not have it the way I have it on my kayak. If you saw in the beginning, I have it at the back of my kayak. It's also fairly lazily strapped on there, but that's simply because I know that these waters are calm or would be calm. There's not much wind here, and the risk level is minimal. But if you have a trolley or something on top of the back of your kayak, of course that compromises your ability to rescue, to self-rescue or peer rescue. You can still peer rescue, meaning being helped out by your friend in case you end up in the water. But if you have to get into your kayak by yourself, and you usually do it from the back with a cowboy rescue, obviously that is not good to have on deck, because that's gonna make that impossible unless you remove it. But in this kayak, and especially because I have a paddle float with
det där blir perfekt.
Even with being by myself, I could rescue from the side. So that's a safety consideration already made.
Ja, det var ju liksom har varit ett konstverk eller vad man ska säga.
Is that you need to be prepared to face unexpected dangers. Well, in this case, we expected it. We went looking for it. You will see a crocodile as we pass this corner. I'm not kidding. There it is. A fearsome crocodile waiting for innocent, unexpected paddlers. This was actually the first time I had seen this. The location is near CROCODILE, and it's a piece of art, you could say. It's kind of an interesting thing. So yeah, even in Sweden, even in Stockholm.
Vi håller tummarna. Du sa att det där badet, är det hyfsat?
Crocodile.
Jaha.
All right, another aspect of a long trip like this, we weren't really planning to paddle after dark, but we ended up doing so. It got fully dark when we carried our kayaks and gear to the train station. Here it's getting dark, and I've already put my headlight on to be able to warn any boats. There are motorboats on this lake. But that worked out nicely. But anyway, you need to have lighting equipment with you for safety and for your own practical purposes. Here, of course, I took the opportunity to have a bit of a free wash for my kayak after a long day. But anyway, the final obstacle that we faced here was that it wasn't at all clear from Google Maps where exactly we could get up from the water, because most of these locations here, there's a lot of reeds and forest and not a lot of spaces where you could actually get up, and many of those are private property. So basically you don't want to be heading up on someone's lawn. Well, we did find a jetty here. A very helpful young lady was there and could give us directions. The thing, though, is that we had planned to optimally go ashore on the other side here, which would have made it for a shorter distance to the nearest train station, commuter train station, where we would bring our kayaks home. But we had to get up on this side, adding a lot of extra distance, a bit of it at least, and, you know, after a long day, we had a lot of carrying to do, and we did that in darkness because it got completely black, completely dark after this. So we were lucky to have this young lady being friendly enough to show us the way, the best paths to get to the more main road, and then we had a long carry. Carrying, in this case, that our kayaks packed down into backpacks.
Vilken fantastisk service det är på det här
about
stället.
16 kilograms, but then you have the gear that you have here with you, etc.
Det uppskattas. Det är kul ändå när man så här Jag återkommer till land efter lång paddling, så är det alltid kul när det är trevliga människor på plats. Men den där fontän...
I believe we had to walk for a couple of kilometers or at least 1.5. And well, Göran here had a trolley that he used actually for his bag, which is a clever system. Whereas I carry this on my back. But it did get heavy. So always check your end point as well as you can. We took a chance that it would work, and it worked, although it was kind of heavy. But anyway, thanks to Göran and everybody who joined on this day, and I'll be talking more in other videos about this stuff. Now, one reference I made there was to the channel of The River Rat, George, in the UK. And the recommendation I would make there is to check out his video on kayak trolleys, because having a proper kayak trolley really makes all the difference. The reason why I chose not for us to use my kayak trolley was because I knew that the hills and the slanted slopes where we carried were not really great for that particular trolley. And George actually has a video where he tests and shows different kayak trolleys, or tells you about their different capabilities and such. So I highly recommend checking that out, and I will be posting a link in the description to this video, to his video and his channel. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll continue talking more about this and other topics in coming videos, so stay tuned here on Air on the Water.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe in order to help others find the information on this channel. Stay safe out there and happy paddles!